Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. I want to make a deal with all of you. If this video can reach 2 likes, my next upload will be a 10-hour video with no mid-roll ads. But on a serious note, thank you all so much for the support on the content lately. The channel is growing again for the first time in like 2 years, and I am shocked. I'm really excited about it. I sat down to record this video, and I don't think I've been this excited to sit down and record in a very long time. So I just wanted to say to all of the new people showing up, all the people that have always been here, I just wanted to say thank you. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy this no ad content, except for the ad right after this intro. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Have a good night. Stay safe. My last passenger exits the car and slams the door, ignoring my goodbye, engrossed in her phone. Alrighty then. I mumble, rating her and opening my map back up. I check the time and I still have time for one last ride before I should head home for some sleep. I set my signal to available and just wait. My last drop-off was for the college dorms, so if I wait a little bit, I'm sure I'll get another. It's Friday night. Everyone's out. I'm tapping my red painted fingers on my wheel when I see her. A teenage girl standing on the sidewalk under a streetlight. She's small, maybe 5 feet. Large brown eyes with a thick dark lash, blonde hair pulled back in a braid, and a cardigan covering her shoulders. She has a small brown purse in her hands. She looks like a doll, and she looked anxious. I pull up a little and roll down my window. "Hey hun, you okay?" I ask. "Oh, yes I am. I'm just..." She looks down the road, waiting for my ride. "Are they late?" I ask her. She's quiet as she stares down the empty streets. "Yes, I suppose they are," she whispers. She seems scared, and I can't decide if she's scared because of the person or because of their absence. "I can wait with you, if you would like," I tell her, putting my status in on available on the app. "Oh, you don't need to. I'm sure I'll manage," she says shakily. "It's no problem. We've already spoken more than me and my last passenger, and I was with her for 20 minutes. I could use the company. Come on in," I tell her, unlocking my door. She pauses and then slowly climbs in. She seems familiar to me. Her small frame and blonde hair, very reminiscent of my sister when she was her age, about 10 years ago. When I see her dress up close, I see it has little flowers all over it. The blush color of the flowers match her cardigan. "Your outfit is cute. Very vintage. I love it," I say, handing her a water bottle. She smiles small and mumbles something that sounds like thank you. We sit in silence for a few minutes before her voice squeaks. "You have pretty eyes. They're very green, like an olive," she says shyly. "Oh, thank you. I made them myself, actually." I wink at her. She laughs softly and looks back at the road. "It's been about 15 minutes. Do you want to call them?" I ask her. "I don't have a phone, and I don't know the number," she tells me. "Do you know where it is that you need to go?" I ask her. She looks at me and nods. "How about I take you? I do it for a living anyways," I offer. Oh, that's so nice of you, but I don't have any money to pay you with," she stammers. "It's on me. Consider it my Good Samaritan act for the day." I pull up my GPS app. "Go ahead and put your address in here." She methodically punches in the information. "Can I ask you a question?" she asks me. "Sure," I respond. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asks, slowly turning to me. I smile sadly. "You seem familiar to me. I think you remind me of my sister. She lives far away from me now. She got married and has kids. I miss her so much, and I would never want her waiting alone outside in the dark. A lot of creeps out at night. I pull up the GPS map. Only 15 minutes away. Not bad at all. She seems to accept that as an answer, as she leans back and gets comfortable in her seat. You're a nice sister, she tells me quietly. I put the car in drive as I pull out into the road. I definitely try to be, I respond. We let the radio fill the silence as we drive through an area I'm not super familiar with. The very manicured trees start getting more scraggly as we turn down the dark curve of streets. The app says 2 minutes away, so I finally ask her, "Where am I taking you?" I ask her. She doesn't respond. As we pull up to iron gates, I slow down and lean forward, trying to see where we ended up. Is this... I begin. Thank you for the ride. You're a very nice person. I like nice people, she tells me, patting my hand. You're welcome, I say slowly, looking at her in my passenger seat. I stop the car and she unbuckles her seatbelt. I'm Marianne, by the way, she says. I smile back at her. Sadie, it was nice to meet you, Marianne, I tell her. It was a nice drive, and thank you again for the ride home. She beams. Home? I ask, looking up at the rusted sign that has weathered over the years. Goodbye, Sadie. She steps out of the car, waves at me through the window, and walks past the sign I've been staring at. Sanitarium. And then I finally realize where I recognize her from. She doesn't remind me of my sister. She was on the news. She murdered her 2 sisters in cold blood and took their eyes as souvenirs. They were calling her the Doll Eyes Killer. When they asked her why she did it, she looked at them confused before speaking. Because they weren't nice, she said matter-of-factly. I'm still staring after her, slack-jawed, when she looks over her shoulder at me and winks. I don't know what I'm doing posting this to a internet forum, but I need to get it out somehow. Maybe writing it all down and posting it online will help. I doubt it, but it's worth a shot. Here goes nothing. My name's Daniel Mathis. I used to be a detective, but I retired 2 months back. Well, maybe retired isn't the right word. Forced to quit is more like it. Either way, I'm not on the force anymore. That's enough about me, though. If I'm going to tell this story properly, then I need to start at the beginning. The very beginning. It started 20 years ago. A child went missing. A little boy, only 10 years old. His name was Johnny. I'd worked on a few missing person cases before, but this one was different. Johnny was walking back from school with some of his friends. It was getting dark, so he decided to take a shortcut through the woods. His friends were too scared to follow, so Johnny went alone. Needless to say, he never made it home. His parents reported him missing a few hours later. We searched the area for 2 days. We questioned every sex offender in a 15-mile radius. Hell, we combed through every inch of that forest, but we never found him. Whoever took Johnny was smart about how they did it. They know how to cover their tracks. It was almost like the kid vanished into thin air. Flash forward a month to mid-January, and I'm knocking on his parents' front door. It was snowing that day. I remember Paul, the kid's father, answered the door. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. Despite this, he still made an effort to be polite. He gave me a weary smile and shook my hand. "Detective Mathis, come in," he said. "My wife's in the living room." His wife, Erin, was sitting with her back to me, staring at the TV. On the screen was a recording of Johnny, taken a couple months before he disappeared. It was grainy and blurry, the way home videos are. He had bright orange hair, freckles, and green eyes. just like his mother. In the video, he was dressed in a puffy jacket and playing around in a pile of leaves. It must have been taken in their front yard. "Mommy, Mommy, watch this!" he yelled, getting a running start before leaping headfirst into the pile of leaves. He burst out a few seconds later, stray foliage clinging to his hair. "Wow, sweetie," Aaron's voice said from behind the camera. Johnny flashed a beaming smile, showing off the gap between his two front teeth before preparing to jump into the leaves once again. I stood in the doorway to the living room watching the video unfold. Once it reached its end, Aaron started it from the beginning. It was only a few seconds long. She gazed onto the TV, rubbing her necklace with her thumb, silently whispering along. "Dear?" Paul said, shaking her from her trance. "Detective Mathis is here." Aaron looked over and paused the video. "Please, take a seat," Paul said, gesturing to a chair. Both he and Aaron sat on the couch across from me, his hand holding hers as I started to speak. "Mr. and Mrs. McLean, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that it is not good news. We have to call off the search for Johnny." Aaron broke down immediately, sobbing into her hands. Paul squeezed his eyes shut, trying to stop himself from doing the same. To be honest, I felt like crying as well. I fought to keep it going for as long as I possibly could, but, well, Johnny's been missing for a month now. We've run out of leads. We're going to keep the case open, but until any new evidence comes to light, well, there's nothing we can do. The living room was filled with the sound of Aaron's wails. Paul tried his best to comfort her, but he was barely keeping it together himself. "You promised," Aaron started to shout. "You promised you would bring him home." "Mrs. McLean, Why can't you bring him home?" she screamed. She rose to her feet and stormed upstairs, leaving Paul and I alone in the living room. "I'm sorry. I really am," I muttered, unable to look him in the eye. Paul wiped the tears away from his face before rising to his feet. "I think you should leave." I looked up at him, opening my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I simply nodded my head and rose to my feet. Paul was barely fighting back his tears as I left. As soon as I shut the door behind me, I could hear him break down and start to sob. Paul and Aaron both died 15 years later. Paul started drinking and never stopped. Aaron drove her car off a bridge in the middle of the night and drowned. I don't think they ever forgave me. Not really. To them, I was always the detective that failed to bring their child home. It was the 20th anniversary of the kid's disappearance, December 5th, when I came home to a letter. It had no return address or any distinguishing features. It was just a plain white envelope. There was no way it could have been delivered by a mailman. Someone dropped it off personally. I still have it somewhere, but I don't need to read it again to remember what it said. The words are branded into my brain like a hot iron. I sat at my dining room table, cut the envelope open, and started to read. "Dear Detective Mathis, if things were different, I would have written this letter to Johnny's parents. I regret that I never got the opportunity to explain this to them. I know they never would have been able to understand, but I would have liked to explain it regardless. Enough about that, though. With them gone, I have decided that the only one worthy of my confession is you. I watched you search for me, you know. I watched your interviews on the news. I watched as every lead you had went cold. In fact, I've seen you in person. You wouldn't have noticed me. I would have just been another face in the grocery store on the streets. But I noticed you. I always noticed you, Detective Mathis. I am sure you have figured it out by now, but I am the one who took Johnny. I am the one who snatched him away in the woods 20 years ago. I still remember how I lured him into my car. I remember how I knocked him unconscious. I remember how much I was shaking. I want you to know that I never touched him. Not like that anyway. I want that to be known. On the back of this letter are coordinates. Follow them and more will be revealed. And if you tell the police about this, you will be throwing away your only chance to do right by Johnny. No more mysteries. No more games. It's time you learn why I did what I did. I sat there reading and rereading that letter for what felt like hours. There were two possibilities. Either the person who took Johnny 20 years ago had really sent me a letter confessing his guilt, or someone was messing with me, and I did not know which was worse. I flipped the letter over and looked at the coordinates, careful not to touch the paper too much. If this really was written by the person who took Johnny, I wanted to preserve the prints. Staring at the coordinates, my first instinct was to call the station. But then another thought came into my mind. I knew that if I showed up with other cops and guys who took Johnny was there, he'd just get arrested. If I went by myself, I knew I could give him what he really deserved. No witnesses. No one to stop me from putting a bullet in his head. Besides, I could have just said it was self-defense. This man put Johnny's parents through hell. I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity to put him in the ground. I took a picture of the coordinates and plugged them into Google Maps. It was about a 30-minute drive located deep in the woods outside of town. I threw on my coat, grabbed my gun, and raced out to my car. I'm surprised I didn't get pulled over with how fast I was going. As I sped down the interstate, the leather on my steering wheel creaked beneath my grip. My knuckles turned white, and I caught myself grinding my teeth together. I thought about what the letter said, how he bragged about seeing me in public. How many times had I walked past this guy? How many times had I passed by someone on the street corner? And that someone was him. I wasn't a cop at this point. I didn't have my badge or my lights on. I was just angry and ready to kill a man. Eventually, I turned onto an old dirt road. I followed the directions until I came upon a trail into the woods. Parking the car, I grabbed the flashlight from my glove box and stepped out. It was twilight, and the forest was quiet, blanketed beneath a thick layer of snow. Not even the birds were making a sound. It was the kind of silence you only find in the dead of winter. As I trudged through the woods, I only became more furious. I imagined what it must have been like when Johnny was brought here. A million questions raced through my mind. Was he unconscious as he was dragged through the snow? Was he even alive? Did he leave a trail of blood, or was he wrapped tightly in a garbage bag? The coordinates took me off the trail and deep into the woods. I didn't even consider if I was going to be able to find my way back. I only had one thing on my mind. Finally, I reached the coordinates, only to find nothing. It was just a small clearing, snow-covered ground, bare trees, and the dark sky hanging above. I shined my flashlight around, desperately searching for something, anything. I double-checked my phone to make sure I was at the right spot. I was. Stumbling over to a dead log laying up against a small hill, I sat down. I buried my face in my hands and wiped away a few tears as my breath disappeared into clouds of vapor. The snow came up to my ankles, and the cold seeped through my boots. I slammed my fist down into the decaying wood. I did it again, then again. I shot to my feet and spun around, screaming into the empty forest as I furiously stomped down on the log. The dry wood splintered and cracked beneath my boot as I yelled every profanity I could think of. After what must have been my 10th kick, my foot broke through the hollow log and slammed into something behind it, something metal. I stumbled back, my foot throbbing in pain, shining my light through the newly formed hole in the log. I saw a rusted metal surface hiding beneath it. I frantically rolled the log aside, the wood breaking apart as I revealed what was underneath. Brushing the snow aside, I realized that what I was staring at was the entrance to a bunker. My breathing was heavy as I tugged on the latch. To my surprise, it was unlocked. The heavy door groaned as I swung it open. I was greeted with stone steps leading down into the dark. Shining my light, I saw just how deep this bunker was. It must have gone down 10 or 15 feet before the steps finally stopped and gave way to an unlit hallway. Drawing my gun, I took a deep breath and started down the steps. Leaving a trail of snow and mud behind me, I reached the bottom of the stairs and shined my light down the hallway. At the end of the hall was a large metal door. My own breath was deafening as I approached. Against the wall, next to the door, was a dial. Holding my flashlight in the crook of my neck, I turned it. I flinched as some sort of intercom screeched on, blaring an old and grainy rendition of When Johnny Comes Marching Home. It began with deafening drums and an ear-piercing whistle before giving way to a cacophony of voices. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. Stuffing my gun into my holster, I clasped my hands over my ears as the sound of an entire choir echoed throughout the bunker. We'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. Pushing the metal door open, I stumbled into the room beyond and frantically looked for the source of the music. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies, they will all turn out, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. At the end of the room was a computer with multiple monitors, and of which was hooked up to a loudspeaker. And we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. I grabbed the wire and ripped it out of the speaker, abruptly stopping the music, with the song no longer playing. I looked around to get a feel for my surroundings. I was in a concrete room with low ceilings and flickering fluorescent lights. It looked like an old hospital ward. The counters were populated by scalpels, operating tools of various sizes, and syringes. In the center of the room was an operating table adorned with leather straps. The whole room smelled like rubbing alcohol. The lights in the ceiling did a poor job at illuminating things, making the whole bunker feel claustrophobic and suffocating. The wall on the left was like something you would see in a mystery film. Hundreds of pieces of paper pinned to a notice board. Some of them had notes furiously scribbled down in handwriting I could barely decipher. Others, however, looked like printed-off images of star systems. A picture of the Milky Way hung next to an old newspaper clipping from 20 years ago that read, "Strange lights spotted in the night sky." The wall opposite of that was, in fact, not a wall, but rather a glass divider, separating this section from the room of whatever was beyond it. Behind the glass was a thick blue mist, so dense that I couldn't even begin to see what was on the other side. "Johnny, are you here?" I shouted, running up to the glass and trying to peer through. Stepping back, I looked around the room in search of something to break the glass. That's when I saw it. On one of the computer screens was a recording titled, "For Mathis." Approaching the screen, I moved the mouse over it and clicked play. "Hello, Detective Mathis." My grip on my gun tightened when I finally heard his voice. For 20 years I had imagined what this monster sounded like. Finally hearing it felt surreal. The voice was slightly garbled by a modulator, but I could still tell that he was around my age, mid-60s at most. If you are listening to this, then you read my letter. If you were hoping to arrest me, or maybe even kill me, I am sorry to disappoint you. I have taken exhaustive steps to cover my tracks. Even if you manage to find my identity, I will be long gone by then. I clenched my jaw, imagining how satisfying it would feel to choke him out. I am sure you have many questions, and I think that this recording will answer most of them. But before I can explain anything, I think it is best to introduce you to someone. With that, the chamber behind the glass divider began to hiss. The fog quickly dissipated, and the room beyond was revealed. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what I saw when the mist fully cleared. I still see it. Every time I close my eyes, every time I fall asleep. I see that thing. On the other side of the glass there was I don't even know what to call it. It looked vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were more akin to an arachnid. Countless fingers with numerous joints sprawled forth from its palms like a spider web. Its skin was brown and covered in a thick layer of slime that dripped down onto the floor. Its emaciated torso was hollow, its ribs curling outward to form a central cavity that bellowed slightly as the thing quietly breathed. "Detective Mathis," said the recording. "Meet the basilisk. Whether that is its true name or simply what it has chosen to be called is beyond me." As my eyes traveled over the creature's horribly misshapen and grotesque form, I saw something that made my heart sink into my stomach. Encased within its open rib cage was a body. It was small, frail, and wrapped in a cocoon of sinew. It dripped with the strange fluid, and parts of its discolored skin seemed to be merging with the creature itself. Taking a step towards the glass, I let out a quiet gasp when I saw the strands of orange hair hanging from its scalp. "Johnny?" I whispered. To my horror, one of his green eyes fluttered open, his irises bloodshot. He looked at me for a split second before his pupil rolled back into his head, and he started to thrash about. He was alive. Through the glass I could hear horrible, excruciating groans. I pray I never have to hear anything like that again. They reverberated off the walls of the bunker, the choked sobs of a child crying not because he is sad or because he needs attention, but because he is in pain. I pressed my hand against the glass and fought back tears as I watched Johnny, the boy I thought had been dead for 20 years, writhe in agony before my eyes. Suddenly his screams were overpowered by a low groan. A strange clicking noise filled the room as the many elongated fingers of the basilisk began to twitch. After a few seconds, Johnny's muffled screams were silenced. His eyes fluttered shut, and he went still. As he stopped moving, so did the basilisk. "Johnny? Johnny!" I screamed, pounding on the glass. Neither he nor the creature responded. "Incredible, isn't it?" The recording spoke again. "The basilisk came to me 20 years ago. Its spacecraft descended from the stars before my very eyes." I was barely listening to the recording at this point. My eyes were fixated on Johnny as he lay motionless inside the creature's chest. "Do you want to know the interesting part, Detective Mathis? When it came to me, I was a dying man. Brain cancer. Stage 4, inoperable." His voice seemed sullen before perking up as he continued. "The basilisk cured me. I should have died years ago, but it halted my tumor in its tracks." I began to look around the room, searching for some way into the chamber, but I found nothing. Johnny was completely sealed off. "Can you see it? The fluid that it is secreting? In that fluid lies the cure to cancer. Can you imagine a world where we do not have to fear such a horrid fate? The enzymes in that fluid were the key. I knew that if I could isolate them, learn how to replicate it, I could make cancer a thing of the past. And the basilisk was willing to help me." The voice paused for a second, and I could hear the man let out a sigh. Except it needed something from me. It wanted a child. I replayed that part in my head more times than I care to admit. It never fails to make me sick. The basilisk is a creature of the abstract. It feeds off futures that never were, and there is no one who has more potential or imagination for the future as a child. Johnny is alive in there. The basilisk is keeping him alive, keeping his psyche trapped in the body of a child, dreaming of the future he never had. I know your first instinct will probably be to try and pull him out, but that won't save him. The basilisk has been feeding off of Johnny for 20 years. They are merged in body and mind. If you separate them, they both will die. I started to cry. I stumbled back and leaned against the operating table, unable to peel my eyes away from the glass. The voice sighed deeply. I know you think I'm a monster, Detective Mathis, but I stand by what I've done. Do you know why? He sounded so arrogant, so damn smug. Because I figured out how to replicate the enzymes. In a few years, I will have a cure to every type of cancer there is. Do you know how many children die of cancer every year? Nearly 100,000. Nearly 2 million children have died in agony since I first took Johnny. Since I gave him to the basilisk. I had to do this. I have a duty to save as many as I can, and the basilisk never would have helped me if I hadn't given it a child. I sacrificed one so I could save millions. No matter how hard I tried, I could not look away from the display on the other side of the glass for more than a few seconds. The otherworldly, incomprehensibly twisted form of the basilisk, Johnny's nearly unrecognizable body trapped within. If I had gone to the government, the voice began again, they would have locked it away beneath the Pentagon. They would have tortured it, and if they ever realized the good it could do, they would have only given it to the rich, the 1% of the 1%, the corrupt, the greedy, and the perverted. I could hear the anger and bitterness in his voice. I'm going to give this cure to everyone, not just the wealthy. Soon cancer will be a distant memory. Johnny has made a necessary sacrifice. His suffering has led to an unprecedented leap in medicine. As the recording continued, I approached the glass, looking at the emaciated husk huddled within the chest cavity. His eyes opened again, only for a second. It looked around the room, seeming to follow the web of fingers clinging to the ceiling. In the seconds before he shut his eye again, I could see Johnny's pain, his fear. Now, the recording continued. The way I see it, you have a few options. You could call your precinct, but that would be foolish. If you show them the basilisk, the CIA won't be far behind. If they don't kill you, they will brainwash you into never speaking of this again. They will take both the basilisk and Johnny away for study. He will remain in his living hell, and it will be your fault. I looked down at the gun in my hand, running my thumb over the black metal. Your second option is to kill them, the recording said. Even though I knew they were coming, I felt my heart sink into my stomach as he said those words. I trust you brought your gun. The glass is not bulletproof, and neither is the basilisk. Just a few shots is all it should take. I am no fool. I know that if the basilisk is left unattended, it will eventually leave the bunker and begin searching for other children. Just like any junkie. The high will wear off and it will search for the next one. I could not bring myself to end its life. I worked with it for many years. It is practically my colleague. For the first time since the recording began, I detected a hint of compassion in his voice. So it's up to you, Detective Mathis. You can put Johnny out of his misery and walk away. You can be satisfied knowing that you ended his suffering the only way you could. Alternatively, you could notify the government. You could risk your own life and doom Johnny to who knows how many more years of agony. You are a pragmatic man, much like myself. I trust you will make the correct decision. And with that, the recording was over. I was left in the bunker with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the horrible abomination on the other side of the glass. Looking up from my gun, I saw Johnny staring at me, not with one eye, but both. Tears trickled down his cheeks as he gazed at me, his eyes pleading for something. I don't know what was going through his mind. I'm not even sure if he was still capable of thought after 20 years of torment. After a few seconds, the basilisk's fingers twitched again, and Johnny was pulled back into his slumber. I looked down at my gun again. My hand was trembling. A few minutes later, I stepped out of the bunker and into the cold night. The chill nipped at my skin, and the barrel of my gun was still smoking. A light snow began to fall as I sat down on the hollow log. I began to sob. I wiped at my eyes, but the tears kept coming. Sorry, sorry, I'm sorry, sorry. I cried. As I wept, I felt my gun's weight in my hand. 2 bullets, lighter than when I had arrived. For the first time in my life, I was finally happy. Well, I was until this week when the phone rang for the first time. I was asleep next to my boyfriend. Let's call him Ryan. Ryan was the sweetest and most caring man in the world. He would do anything for me, and I would do anything for him. But that all changed that night. I woke up to the phone ringing. I was barely awake, and I could only just manage to open my eyes slightly. Through the slight gap, I saw it was 3:17 a.m. Who the hell is calling me at this time of night? It must be something bad, I thought, whilst I reached over for my phone. Ryan hadn't moved. He must have been in a very deep sleep. I picked up the call groggily, said hello. Ryan has a second cell phone. It's hidden above the shower. Move the loose ceiling tile. You'll find it there. The voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it had a raspy quality to it. It certainly wasn't a voice of someone I knew, but I thought it must be a prank. However, before I could even respond, the anonymous caller cut the line dead. I sat there for a few moments thinking this must be some kind of joke, but it wasn't funny. I didn't understand why someone would joke about that. If it was a friend, they know my past. They know I have been cheated on before and it broke me. Some friend they are if this is one of them. I decided I would go check just for my peace of mind. There's no harm in checking, and if there isn't anything there, I could just go back to sleep and forget about the prank until tomorrow. I carefully got out of bed so as to not wake Ryan, and crept over to the bathroom door. I had to stand on the edge of the bath to reach above the shower, but I found a loose tile and moved it. I reached up and felt for something. I didn't find anything at first and felt a sense of relief wash over me. But then as I got around to the part just above my head, I felt a phone. My mind began racing. What was this doing here? Surely Ryan couldn't do this to me. Then my mind went back to the call. How could anyone even know this? Was it a friend of Ryan's he had told about the phone and they were warning me? I stepped down and turned the phone on. Luckily, there was no lock. I swiped it open and went to the messages. There were hundreds of messages dating back to over a year ago with someone called Jasmine. They had even mentioned me in the texts. Carla's at it again. She's always trying to start arguments. Never leaves me alone. One text read, "You need to leave her, babe. I need you. I love you." I couldn't read anymore. Tears began to fill my eyes and I could barely see anything. I was distraught. How could he do something like this to me? I ran to the bedroom, threw the phone at him and started shouting. He had no remorse. He just asked how I knew about the phone. I kicked him out that night and told him to never come back. He took what he could and said he would come back for the rest later. I told him he would never step foot in this house again, and that I would be mailing his stuff to his new address. I called my sister, crying down the phone to her. She said she would come and stay with me a few nights in the guest bedroom. She came over, and we watched a few films, drank some wine, and ordered takeout. It made me feel a bit better, but I was still devastated. I told Lauren that I was going to head up to bed around 11 p.m. I fell asleep quickly, probably the wine's doing. Then again, I was awoken by the sound of my phone ringing on the bedside table. I was still a little drunk and had almost forgotten about the call the previous day. I told Lauren about it, but she was convinced that it was one of Ryan's friends who felt guilty about knowing he was cheating. I picked up the phone and read the time. 3:17 a.m. shown on the screen in big, bold white letters. The same time as yesterday. I started to shake slightly and I could feel my heart beating out of my chest. After what seemed like forever, I finally built up the courage to answer the call. Hello? I said, stammering. For a second the line was silent. Then, in that quiet, raspy voice, the caller said, "He left something behind, under the floorboard, the third one from the wardrobe." The call ended. I called out to Lauren, but there was no answer. She must have fallen asleep on the couch downstairs. I paced around the room for a minute, thinking. I eventually went and got the flathead screwdriver from the bathroom and knelt down in front of the wardrobe and counted until the third floorboard. It came up easier than expected. There was a small bag in there. I grabbed the bag, put the floorboard back, put the screwdriver on the side table, and sat cross-legged on my bed. The bag contained an engagement ring, the one that Ryan had told me he was saving up for, the one he never got to give me. I looked at it in disgust, just thinking about what he had done to me. I was in the middle of cursing him out in my mind when a small USB flash drive fell out of the bag. I hadn't noticed it before. It was one of those mini ones. It read, SanDisk, 64 GB. On the side, not that I really knew what that meant. I was curious about what could be on it. I thought it must be videos of him cheating on me with that girl he was texting. I loaded up my laptop and plugged the flash drive in. On it there were folders with multiple girls' names on them. I opened the first one. What I found there horrified me. I can barely even write this without feeling the urge to vomit. It started off with pictures of the girls sleeping. In a few of them he was holding a knife near their necks while they slept. There were hundreds of these photos of multiple different women, but the last photo of each of the folders was the same. The woman was laid naked on the bed with her throat slit, covered in blood. In the corner, Ryan was standing there with a sinister grin on his face, holding the knife. Every single one of these folders were the same, except mine. I felt nauseous. My head was pounding, and I felt like I was about to pass out. The man I loved was some kind of psychotic killer, and he was planning on doing the same to me. There were pictures of me sleeping and him holding the knife near me, just like all the rest of them. I was about to get out of bed and rush downstairs to Lauren, but I was stopped by the sound of my phone ringing. I looked at my phone bewildered. It read 3:17 a.m., and an unknown number was calling me. It made no sense how I checked the time before and it said 3:17 a.m. I answered, still confused, and the same voice spoke to me again. "He's here. Ryan is downstairs. He's about to come up." The line cut off and I dropped my phone. I heard the creak of the stairs with each of his footsteps. I panicked, not knowing what to do. I looked around and realized I still had the screwdriver, so I grabbed it and hid behind the door. Ryan crept slowly and opened my door as quietly as he could. As he entered, I drove the screwdriver as hard as I could into his shoulder. He yelped in pain, but didn't go down like I thought he would. He grabbed me by the hair and threw me to the floor. I looked at his right hand and saw the long blade that would be the cause of my death. "You stupid. Look what you've done. I should have killed you before." Before he could continue on, Lauren had woken up from all the commotion. He had grabbed a knife from the kitchen and ran upstairs. She saw Ryan on top of me and pushed the knife straight into the back of Ryan's neck. He fell down with a thud next to me, with half of him falling on me. I pushed him off me and leapt up and hugged Lauren, crying with relief. We called the police, and we were both taken to the station where we were told Ryan was dead, and that they would be looking into the women on the flash drive. That is where I am writing this from now. So if you ever get a phone call at 3:17 a.m. from an unknown number, please answer it, and please, for the love of God, do what it says. If I didn't, I would be just another victim on that sick man's flash drive. The guy moved in late last Saturday night. I know because I woke up near midnight to him ramming his U-Haul into the dumpster outside my bedroom. From my second-story window, I watched as he stepped out to inspect the damage. He was tall, almost as tall as the U-Haul, and when he put his hand on his hip, the gap between his arm and chest must have been big enough to fit a medicine ball. I considered going out to help him, but I really didn't want to open that can of worms. I went back to bed, reassuring myself that he'd probably appreciate my pretending I hadn't seen anything. There was a knock at my door early the next morning, and you can't imagine my surprise when I looked through the peephole to see that same man. Well, from the chest down. I only knew it was the same guy because I recognized the white button down. What the hell was he doing at my door at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning? Did he see me watching him? Was he mad that I hadn't come out to help? I almost didn't answer, but I knew I'd have to face him eventually. I prepared an excuse before opening the door. He stepped back and released a wide, toothless smile. He looked sick. His skin was gray and his lips were black. He extended his hand and said, "Let's hang out." No emotion, just the bare words. Like Google Translate, except high-pitched and excited. A happy cartoon character. As a 6-foot-tall man, I craned my neck to look up at him. As I met his gaze, something came over me. A strange pleasure of familiarity, like I was back at my parents' house and my mom was baking cookies. I felt the urge to say yes. Simultaneously, I could appreciate the oddness. I didn't know this guy, even if part of me did, somehow. I fought with myself, figuratively stepping in and out of the door as his smile never relented. "Not right now, Mikey," I said. I hesitated, then closed and locked the door. It wasn't until I was back in bed that I realized, how the hell did I know his name? But the memory faded like a dream. At first I was certain his name was Mikey, but by the time I fell asleep I was sure that I'd just thrown a random name out. Did I even know a Mikey? I woke up a few hours later and spent the day playing video games and watching Friends. I felt uneasy, but I've always had a bad taste in my mouth when it comes to Sundays. This weird feeling that it's going to be the last good day of my life, like the next day is the end of all happiness and the start of eternal torture. Maybe I just hate my job more than most people. Around 5:30 a.m. Monday morning, there was another knock. You gotta be kidding me. "Seriously, dude?" I said as I opened the door. He held both hands out, palms up as if presenting treasure. Atop them was the most beautiful pastry I've ever seen. It was fluffy like a cloud, but browned and crispy. It was drizzled with chocolate, peanut butter, and caramel. I reached for it and was bombarded with memories as I took the beauty into my hand. I was at Mikey's house. I was sitting at a wooden kitchen table as he frosted a beautiful cupcake decorated to look like a rose. My mouth watered as he delivered it to me like a present. I sunk my teeth into it and sighed with relief. He was my best friend. I'd known him since childhood. I wanted to give him a hug, but at the same time, my heart was rising in my throat, threatening to choke me as I had the feeling of people watching me from every angle. "Let's hang out," Mikey said, reaching for me. I took a step forward, the two sides of my brain fighting for control, and slammed the door shut. Looking down at my hands, I saw 2 pieces of bread with half a dozen crude slabs of peanut butter and jelly, some on top of the sandwich, some underneath, and some on each side. It was like it was made by someone who didn't know what a sandwich was. I dropped it on the floor. At work, I couldn't keep my mind off him. As I sat at my desk, vaguely trying to edit the introduction to some algebra textbook, I was sure that I had never seen him before, but I had the memories of memories, like once, in a dream within a dream from a different life centuries ago. We had been best friends. I fought my way through the day. I told myself I wasn't going to answer the door for him ever again. If I saw him, I'd run away. Under no circumstances would I look at him, talk to him, or touch him. I drove home. I wasn't 2 steps out of my car when he approached me. "Let's hang out," he said. I tried to turn away, but then my life was sunshine and rainbows. I couldn't help but smile. Without bending his back, he leaned his face down to mine. We locked eyes. I can't remember what they looked like, but I remember what they made me feel, what they made me remember. I was a toddler on a swing set. I was smiling and laughing. Behind me, the tall man, Mikey, was the one smiling as he pushed me again and again. Then it was my birthday. I watched as Mikey lit my candles. He sparked the lighter with his gray hands, his yellow nails longer than his fingers. On the baseball field, he was my coach. At school, he was my favorite teacher. I remembered me and Mikey sitting in the back seat of my car. There was butterflies in my chest. I leaned in and kissed his black, rotting lips. I felt disgust, but remembered love. "Let's hang out," he said. And then I was following him, because he was my everything. He was a very good thing I could remember. But no, I don't know him. I imagined walking into his apartment. I smiled, then screamed. I wanted to run away, but I'd miss him so much. We walked to his door as my mind was screaming for me to run. He was reaching for the knob when some animalistic part of my brain took hold of me. I ran to my apartment and locked the door behind me. When I heard a knock, I grabbed my phone and called the police. I told them there was a guy who kept knocking on my door and wouldn't stop no matter how many times I told him to go away. I watched from my bedroom window as the officer pulled up. I took a peek through my peephole and saw that Mikey was still there. I sat next to the door and waited. "Tommy, what's going on, man? Long time no see." "Let's hang out." "Of course, man. I can't really thank you enough for last time." I looked through the peephole to see them walking away. A door opened and closed. Then I heard screams. I called out of work the next day and a couple of police officers came by. I told them the truth, minus all the weird stuff. They knocked on every apartment, but nothing ever came of it. I'm pretty sure I heard some happy laughter and sounds of reunion when they knocked on Mikey's door. It's been a week since then, and I haven't left my apartment. I got fired, and I'm starting to run out of food. I know I'll have to leave eventually, but what happens if I run into him? Right now, I'm certain he's dangerous. But what will I think if I see him again? What will I say when he asks me to hang out? What will I remember? What will I do? As ridiculous as this may sound, this post might be one of my last chances. I'm sure one of you will comment that this website never actually existed in the first place before I refresh the page to find an error code and a link to purchase the domain name. But Reddit being willed out of existence is the least of my worries right now. This is Graydon's fault. I hadn't heard from Graydon in 3 months when he showed up at my apartment just last night. He looked terrible. His usually neat brown hair was greasy and unkempt, hanging in stringy clumps around his face. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his clothes looked like he'd been sleeping in them for weeks. But what really bothered me was the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, like he expected someone to be following him. "Do you remember me?" he said before I could even invite him inside. I was confused. "Of course I do, Graydon. Where have you been? I've been texting you for months. Your mom said..." "Please." He grabbed my arm, and I could feel his hand shaking. "I can't explain it here. You just have to trust me. There's something I have to show you." We'd been friends since high school, and I'd never seen him like this. Graydon was the type of guy who planned everything 3 weeks in advance and color-coded his class schedules. Seeing him this frantic and desperate was genuinely unsettling. "Okay," I said. grabbing my jacket as quietly as possible. Emma was already asleep, and I didn't want to wake her. I slipped my engagement ring off my finger and set it on the nightstand. No point risking losing it wherever we were going. Where are we headed? Whitmore Caverns, about an hour north of here. I knew the place. A series of limestone caves that used to offer guided tours until they shut down in the 90s after a couple of accidents. The entrance was still accessible if you knew where to look, but most people stayed away. It wasn't exactly the kind of place you'd expect to visit at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. The drive was uncomfortable. Graydon barely spoke, just stared out the window and occasionally muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite make out. When I tried to ask him what was going on, he'd just shake his head and say, "Not yet. You'll understand when we get there." We parked at the old visitor center, now just a crumbling concrete building covered in graffiti. Graydon pulled 2 flashlights from his backpack and handed me one. "Follow me," he said. "And don't say a word until we get deep enough." Deep enough for what? Just don't talk, please. It's important. The entrance to the caves was hidden behind a cluster of overgrown bushes about 50 yards from the parking lot. Graydon moved through them like he'd done this before, leading me down a narrow stone pathway that disappeared into complete darkness. The cave was bigger than I'd expected. The main passage was wide enough for us to walk side by side, with rough limestone walls that sparkled in our flashlight beams. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, creating an echo that made it impossible to tell how deep the cave system went. We walked in silence for what felt like 20 minutes. Descending steadily into the earth, the temperature dropped with each step, and I could see my breath forming small clouds in the beam of my flashlight. Graydon seemed to know exactly where he was going, never hesitating at the various branching passages we encountered. Finally, he stopped in front of a section of wall that looked identical to every other section we'd passed, but when I got closer, I could see a small hole about the size of a baseball carved into the limestone at eye level. "Okay," Graydon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you see the flame?" I aimed my flashlight at the hole. It was just empty darkness, maybe 6 inches deep before the beam hit solid rock. "Graydon, there is no—" "Stop." He grabbed my wrist. "Don't tell me what is and what isn't. Just yes or no. Do you see a flame?" His grip was tight enough to hurt, and there was something in his eyes that made me take a step back. This wasn't the Graydon I knew. This was someone on the edge of a complete breakdown. "No," I said carefully. "I don't see a flame." His face contorted with frustration. "Look again. Really look. Are you absolutely sure you don't see anything burning in there?" I looked again, even though it wouldn't change anything. The hole was empty. No flame, no light, nothing but limestone and shadow. "I'm sure, Graydon." That's when he grabbed my hand and shoved it into the hole. The pain was immediate and excruciating. It felt like I'd grabbed a red-hot coal, a searing heat that shot through my palm and up my arm. I screamed and jerked my hand back, stumbling backward until I hit the opposite wall. When I looked down at my palm, there was a perfect circular burn in the center, already starting to blister. The skin was angry red and felt like it was still on fire. "What the hell, Graydon? Why did you—" I looked back at the hole and froze. There was a flame burning inside. A small, steady flame, maybe 2 inches tall, flickering gently like a candle in a draft. It cast dancing shadows on the walls around us, and I could feel the heat radiating from the opening. "Do you see it now?" Graydon asked, his voice filled with desperate hope. Yes, I see it." That's when he lost it completely. "Yes!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the cave system. "I'm not alone anymore. I'm not crazy. Someone else can see it." He started shifting between hysterically laughing and crying within seconds of each other, spinning around in circles like a child. 3 weeks. For 3 weeks I've been living in this hell alone. But you see it now. You see the flame. I'm not alone. I was so focused on his manic celebration that I didn't notice him backing toward the cluster of rock behind him. He tripped over their jagged edges, and I watched in horror as he fell backward, his head striking the pointed tip of a limestone formation with a wet, sickening crack. The sound echoed through the cave like a gunshot. Braden's body convulsed once, then went completely still. Blood pooled beneath his head, black in the flickering light of the flame that I could now see burning steadily in the wall. It took me 2 hours to drag his body out of the cave system. He was heavier than I'd expected, and I had to stop every few minutes to rest and figure out which passage led back to the surface. The combination of sweat and tears in my eyes only made it harder to proceed. By the time I reached the parking lot, my clothes were soaked with Graydon's blood, and my burned hand was throbbing with every heartbeat. I called 911 as soon as I had cell service. The paramedics arrived first, followed by 2 sheriff's deputies who took one look at the scene and immediately started asking questions. I told them everything. About Graydon showing up at my apartment, about the cave, about the accident. I watched them load his body into the ambulance on a stretcher covered with a white sheet. At the police station, they kept asking me the same questions over and over again. Why had we gone to the cave? What were we doing down there? How exactly had the accident happened? I answered everything honestly, even though I could see the skepticism in their eyes when I mentioned the flame. They kept looking at each other with expressions I couldn't quite read. Confusion, maybe, or suspicion. After 3 hours of questioning, the chief of police came into the interview room with a folder in his hands. "Look," he said, sitting down across from me. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing here, but we need to get this sorted out." "I'm not playing any game," I said. "I told you exactly what happened." He opened the folder and spread several photographs across the table. Crime scene photos of the cave, showing the exact spot where Graydon had fallen. But in every picture there was no body, no blood, no evidence that anyone had died there. "We found you 3 hours ago," he said, wandering around the parking lot, covered in blood and talking about your dead friend. "But here's the thing. We searched every inch of those caves. There is no body. There is no evidence that anyone else was ever down there with you." My heart started racing. "That's impossible. You put him in the ambulance. I watched you do it." "Son, there was no ambulance. There was no body. And there's no record of anyone named Graydon living in this county." I stared at the photographs, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. In the pictures, the limestone formation that had killed Graydon was clean and undamaged. No blood, no sign of impact. "I don't understand," I whispered. "He was my friend. We went to high school together." The chief leaned back in his chair. "Look, it's not illegal to report a false death, technically, but I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish here. Are you looking for money? Having some kind of mental crisis?" "No, We're going to let you go with a warning," he interrupted. "But if you come back here with any more stories about dead friends who don't exist, we're going to have a different conversation." They released me an hour later, and I took a taxi home in a daze. Everything felt wrong, like I was living in someone else's life. I kept looking at the burn on my palm, the one piece of evidence I had that any of this had really happened. When I got home, Emma was waiting up for me, curled on the couch in her pajamas. "Vince, thank God you're okay. What happened? You look terrible." I sat down next to her and tried to explain everything. Graydon showing up, the cave, the accident, the police not believing me. She listened patiently, occasionally reaching over to touch my arm or smooth my hair. "That sounds absolutely terrifying," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry you went through that, but you're home now, and you're safe." She stood up and kissed my forehead. "I need to be up early tomorrow, so I need to go to bed. You should get some rest too." Before I knew it, I was waking up on the couch from a full night of sleep. It was unlike me to fall asleep so suddenly, but after last night, I wasn't too surprised. Sunlight was streaming through the windows, and I could hear birds chirping outside. Emma was already gone for work, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter. I picked it up and read the front. "I love you, sleepyhead." I smiled despite everything that had happened and slipped the note into my pocket before heading out the door. I felt the need to maintain a sense of normalcy in all of this nightmare. I tried calling Graydon's phone on my way out twice, but was met with a dial tone each time. My first stop was the corner store for my usual morning coffee. I'd been buying the same large coffee there every day for 2 years. Always 99 cents. Always from the same machine near the register. There was a handwritten sign that said, "Coffee, always 99 cents, in faded black marker. I put a dollar bill on the counter. "This should cover it." He stared at the dollar like I'd just tried to pay with Monopoly money. "Dude, you know that's not enough. Our Arabic coffee is $2.50. "Good one, Mike," I said with a chuckle. "This coffee has always been 99 cents. I'm here all the time." The cashier finally looked at me with irritation. "Yeah, I know, Vince. You come in almost every day." He shook his head. "Our coffee has always been $2.50 and always will be. Are you feeling alright, man?" I looked back at the coffee stand and read the sign again. Arabic coffee, $2.50 a cup. I shook off an intense shiver down my spine. I pulled the remaining $1.50 from my wallet as I reached toward the cashier. He pointed at my hand. "Hey, alright, you finally left her. Good for you. You're a free man now." Confused, I glanced down at my hand. I had forgotten to put my ring back on. I laughed awkwardly. "Oh, no. I just took my ring off last night because, well, I just took it off." It felt like too much to explain at the moment, and I was already running late for work. "Sure thing, buddy." He gave me an exaggerated wink as he handed me the receipt before I headed back to my car. At work, I tried to focus on my usual tasks, but I kept thinking about the strange interaction at the corner market. Around 10 a.m., my coworker Dave stopped by my cubicle. "Morning, Vince. You look tired," he said, glancing at my face. Suddenly, an overwhelming wave of exhaustion hit me like a physical force. My eyelids felt heavy, and I had to grip my desk to keep from swaying. "At least that tea will wake you up," Dave continued, nodding at the cup in my hand. "It's usually coffee," I said, lifting the cup to take a sip. But when the liquid hit my tongue, it was without a doubt tea. Earl Grey, hot and strong. With just a hint of bergamot. I instinctively spit it out. I stared at the cup in confusion. I'd just bought coffee. I poured it myself. Even took a sip on the way here, but I was definitely drinking tea. Dave had already walked away, leaving me staring at my cup and questioning my own senses. The exhaustion was getting worse, making it hard to concentrate on anything. I put my head down on my desk, just for a moment. "Oh man, tired already?" Another coworker, Joan, was walking past with a stack of files. "It's only 10 a.m. You can do this." The moment she said, "You can do this," the exhaustion vanished completely. I sat up straight, feeling more alert and energized than I had all morning. It was like someone had just injected caffeine directly into my bloodstream. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was wrong. The coffee becoming tea, the sudden exhaustion and equally sudden energy, it all felt connected somehow to what had happened in the cave. I sent Emma a text around lunch. Something funny happened with the clerk at the corner store today that will make you laugh. I'll tell you about it when I get home. She didn't respond. I tried again at the end of my shift. Heading home now. Want me to pick you up anything? Still no response. As I was packing up to leave, my boss, Mr. Harrison, appeared at my cubicle. He looked annoyed, which wasn't unusual, but there was something particularly hostile in his expression. "Vince, we need to talk about your performance lately," he said, loud enough for half the office to hear. "Your work has been sloppy, you are making careless mistakes, and frankly, your attitude has been unprofessional." "I'm sorry, sir. I know I've been distracted, but I don't want to hear excuses." He cut me off. "You're supposed to be a professional, but lately you've been acting like an amateur. At this rate, you're worthless at this company." The word worthless hit me like a physical blow. I felt something shift inside me, a cold emptiness that seemed to spread through my chest. My phone buzzed with a notification from my banking app, then another and another. I pulled out my phone and saw multiple overdraft alerts. My checking account was showing a negative balance of $847. My savings account, which had over $3,000 in it yesterday, was showing zero. Even my emergency fund was completely empty. "Sir, I started to say, but Mr. Harrison had already walked away. I sat at my desk for several minutes, staring at my phone and trying to understand how all of my money could have just disappeared. There were no transactions listed, no withdrawals or transfers. The money was simply gone, as if it had never existed in the first place. When I got home, I knew something was wrong before I even opened the door. The apartment felt different, quieter, emptier somehow. Inside, most of our furniture was gone. The dining room table Emma and I had picked out together, the bookshelf full of our combined collection, the framed photos of us from various trips and occasions, all of it had vanished. What remained was a single couch facing a large TV, a gaming console with a stack of old pizza boxes and empty beer cans scattered across the floor. "Emma?" I called out, but there was no response. The words of the cashier echoed through my head. "You finally broke up with her." I tried calling her, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring, but her voice sounded different, annoyed. "Hello?" "Emma, thank God. Where are you? What happened to our apartment? All our stuff is gone and..." "What are you doing?" Her voice was cold. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Emma, it's me. It's Vince." There was a long pause. I could hear children playing in the background and a man's voice saying something I couldn't make out. "Look, Vince, I know it's you," she finally said. "But this isn't funny. If this is some kind of prank..." "Emma, what are you talking about? We're engaged. We live together. We had dinner together 2 nights ago, and you made that pasta dish with the sun-dried tomatoes." "Jesus Christ, you broke up with me 3 years ago, Vince," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I don't know how you got my new number, but you're acting insane. I should have known that was you texting me earlier today." "Emma, please, I know this sounds crazy, but something is happening to me. You left me a note this morning. You wrote, 'I love you, sleepyhead.' I have it right here in my pocket." I'm hanging up now. Don't call me back or I'll call the police. "But Emma..." "Creep," she said, and the line went dead. I collapsed on the floor, the phone falling from my hand. This wasn't possible. Emma and I had been together for 2 years. We'd gotten engaged 6 months ago. I had photos of us, text messages, emails, proof that we'd built a life together. But when I looked around the apartment, there was no sign that a woman had ever lived here. No photos of us together. No second toothbrush in the bathroom. No clothes in the closet except my own. I pulled out the note she'd left this morning, desperate for some proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The front still read, "I love you, sleepyhead," in her familiar handwriting. But as I watched, the ink began to fade. The letters grew lighter and lighter until they disappeared completely, leaving only blank paper. I flipped the note over, but there was more writing on the back, words I hadn't noticed before. "You're the only one for me." The moment I finished reading those words, I heard the sound of crashing cars from outside, multiple impacts, one after another, followed by the screech of metal and the hiss of steam from radiators. But there were no screams, no shouts for help, just the mechanical sounds of accidents without any human voices. I rushed outside my front door and looked down toward the main street. Every car I could see had crashed, some into each other, some into parked vehicles. Others veered off the road entirely, but all of them were empty, their engines still running, headlights cutting through the growing darkness. The sidewalks were completely deserted. No pedestrians, no one running for help, no emergency responders. It was like every person in the city had simply vanished. I ran further down the road calling for anyone, but my voice echoed off empty buildings. Every storefront was dark. Every window was empty. The only sounds were the distant hum of abandoned engines and the occasional car horn from vehicles whose drivers were no longer there to turn them off. There was one horn that stood out, though. It wasn't steady. It was hitting in bursts, as if someone was pounding on the steering wheel. I walked several blocks until I found a car that had flipped over on the side of the highway. There was someone in the passenger seat. My heart stopped when I realized who it was. Emma was strapped inside the overturned vehicle, a large shard of glass from the windshield piercing her throat. Her foot was pressed against the steering wheel, causing the horn to sound with each spasm of her body. Blood was pooling beneath her, and her eyes were wide with terror and confusion. The horn kept blaring. She just kept kicking and kicking. When she saw me approaching, her mouth moved like she was trying to speak, but only gurgling sounds came out. Blood bubbled from the wound in her neck, and her eyes, those beautiful green eyes I'd fallen in love with so many years ago, stared at me with a mixture of recognition and horror. She knew who I was. In her final moments, I think she remembered. I reached through the broken window trying to help her, but there was nothing I could do. The glass had severed something vital, and I could only watch as the life faded from her eyes. Her foot finally stopped pressing against the horn, and the sudden silence was deafening. I'm writing this now sitting in my empty apartment, surrounded by evidence of a life that apparently never existed. Everyone is gone, not just Emma, but everyone. The entire world has become empty except for me. And I think I know why. You're the only one for me. I'm posting this in the desperate hope that someone, somewhere is still out there. That maybe there's another person who touched the flame, who understands what's happening. If you're reading this, please comment. Please let me know I'm not alone. Because if I am truly the only one left, I don't know how much longer I can handle the silence. The flame is still burning in that cave. I can feel it calling to me, promising answers, promising an end to this isolation. Maybe it's time to go back. Maybe it's time to join Graydon and let someone else carry this burden. Please, if you're reading this, just tell me you're real. Tell me I'm not the only one left. I'm a wedding planner, And I am good at my job. If a client wants something, I go above and beyond. I get them what they want, especially big clients. And Miss Laura was a big client. Her family had wealth that went back to the first colonies, and it didn't look like they'd lost any of it in the intervening 400 years. I remember touching up my lipstick in the vanity mirror above the driver's seat and thinking to myself that this was it. I was on the cusp of 40, and I was about to break into the event planner upon echelon of 1%er weddings. It would be Miss Laura's wedding, but it would be my coronation. Sweet little Laura ushered me into her home, and we spoke at lengths. Her expectations were very reasonable, and she knew what she was talking about. A life of debutante balls and campaign fundraisers and 500-person Christmas parties was the curriculum she'd learned from. There was only one thing that Laura wanted that no other wedding planner said they could get. I want the woman who lives in the house of pounds. I furrowed my brow. Maybe Laura wasn't as reasonable as I thought she was. Why? The crone? Why on earth do you want her there? Because she's my great-aunt on my father's side, Laura said. That was news to me. I didn't know anyone who'd even met the infamous crone from the House of Pounds. And here was Laura claiming the old witch was family. May I ask why you or your father don't invite her yourselves? She pushed down on the hem of her skirt at her knees, and her smile faltered. You know why they call it the House of Pounds, don't you? Of course I knew. Everybody in town knew. But I lied. I don't pay attention to that sort of thing. But you know, Laura added more bite to her voice. I'll bet you even know the words. I involuntarily scanned for escape routes. What words? Say them, Laura said. Say the words or I will find someone else to plan my wedding. Women from inherited wealth have the luxury of following through with threats. Laura had been kind and gracious to me, but also expected me to dance to her tune. So I said the words. Welcome to the House of Pounds, where all are given just one round. First penalty's a pound of flesh, but try again. She'll take the rest. Do you know what it means? She said. This was like pulling teeth. I did not want to have this conversation, but I answered. I have an idea. Laura looked behind me, behind herself, and all around the room. I was a well-socialized woman. I knew she was about to tell me a secret. I was half right. She didn't tell me the secret, but she showed it to me. She hiked her skirt up all the way to her waist so I could see her panties, whole thighs and buttocks. Laura's flesh was missing, a pound's worth, if I had to guess, from the inside of her thigh, right below her perineum. I shuddered. Laura's face reddened. She pulled her skirt back down before looking away. I thought I saw the glimmer of a tear welling in one of her eyes. She wiped her face. You see, I can't go back. I've given my pound of flesh. If I go again, she'll take the rest, I said. Laura nodded. Exactly. I have to tell you, I didn't see what the big deal was once I parked in the driveway and saw it up close. The House of Pounds was nothing more than a shabby example of Gothic revival architecture, an old money homestead that had faded along with the blue in the family's blood. If I had to guess, I'd say she was probably a hoarder and a cat lady. I highly doubted she reserved her reputation as an evilly mystical witch. I walked up and knocked on the door. It opened before I could knock twice. A little girl who couldn't have been older than 6 stood in the traditional Victorian maid's outfit. Please come in, she said. She is expecting you. The grade school chambermaid indicated for me to walk down the main hallway. She used her thumb to point the way because the hand she pointed with had its 4 other fingers missing. This was the creepiest way I'd ever been welcomed into someone's home. But in for the penny, in for a pound. I laughed a laugh specific to my humming nerves and punny thoughts. I walked down the hallway until I saw another grade school chambermaid. She stood next to an open door, through which I saw a room shadowed pitch black. This little girl was missing both of her hands. Have you ever seen a child missing a body part, let alone several? It's not just upsetting. It cores you like an apple. The closest I'd ever felt to that coring was after waking from a recurrent nightmare about my mother being torn apart by Rottweilers, and thinking she might really have been mauled. My bowels felt stuffed full of lead shot and detached from my intestines. "Hello?" I said, eyeing the girl's missing hands. "Are you okay?" She whispered like she was afraid someone was listening. "I have a secret to tell you." She waved one of her stumps inward. I leaned close to her and turned my ear toward her lips. I heard a man's voice say, "In for a penny, in for a pound." I turned and saw a 6-foot ghoul dressed in the same Victorian-made outfit as the two little girls. I screamed and turned to run, but he wrapped one of his long limbs over me from behind, pinning my arms to my body and my body to his. He covered my mouth and whispered, "Shh, shh, quiet now, quiet now." I cried into his hand. "You're here to meet her, aren't you?" he said. He removed his hand so I could speak, but I couldn't. I was out of my wits with fear. "Answer me, or I'll take a pair of mittens from the flesh I cut out of your belly." I sobbed and hurriedly nodded my head. "Use your words like a big girl," he said. "Yes," I said through my tears, my body shaking almost like I was having a seizure. "Yes, I'm here to meet her." He let go from behind me, and I heard him step back and away. I turned to face him, but there was no him there. It was only the grade school chambermaid. "Then by all means." The little girl shoved me into the darkness through the open door behind my back. I went tumbling down a 45-degree angle chute. I heard inhuman voices. What might have been 50 monsters' voices roaring and screeching at me. They called me terrible names, nonsensical names, cruelly true names. I felt a sharp, hot, wet pain somewhere in my body, like 10-penny nails being hammered into my stomach, my spine, between my toes and fingers, in the soft flesh between my genitalia and anus. The pain felt like every hurt I'd ever felt puncturing my flesh again all at once. I screamed and cried as I tumbled down the chute. It spat me out onto a basement's dirt floor. A single hanging light bulb shone over the dusty ground. I put my hands out in front of me and saw blood run in rivulets down my arms. My blood went through my fingers and soaked into the dirt. I hung my head between my biceps. How was I going to escape? She stepped into the light, far enough to silhouette her face but not show it. I wasn't looking at her directly, but through my peripheral vision. I thought if I looked up, I could see the face of 100 monsters, see malformed lips defame and degrade me. "Look at me," she said. I shook my head no, watching my blood dribble. From behind her, I heard the low, ticking rumble of a crocodile. Then I heard 2, then 3, then 100 reptilian groans bellowing at once, threatening to rupture my eardrums. I screamed, "Okay." The crocodilian bellows stopped. I looked up. I saw a woman in a widow's black mourning dress. It covered her arms up to her wrists and her neck up to her chin. Her face was obscured by a lace-black mourning veil, but even through the veil, I could see outlines of missing pieces. A quarter of a lip gone, half of one ear, a dry and angry eyeball glaring through where an eyelid used to be. "Why are you here?" she said. "Why do any of you come when you already know the words?" "I'm here because of a wedding." Who are you marrying? She asked. Not my wedding. Someone else's. She laughed low in her throat. A pound of flesh for someone else's betrothal. It sounds rather like the Merchant of Venice. The Merchant of Venice. The Merchant of Venice, I thought to myself. Remembering long-forgotten English classes, stories I hadn't thought of in years. Bargain. I screamed it out. I screamed it out again. Bargain. I stood up, my pulse pushing blood from my wounds till my clothes were soaked crimson. I assert my right to bargain. I will surrender my pound of flesh, but only with consideration. I demand a contract for the exchange. I saw the ghost of a wretched smile through her veil. I never thought I would hear it. If you assert your right to bargain, I am not one to refuse. I presume you offer up your pound of flesh. I found power waiting in my voice. I offer up a pound of flesh as payment on a bargain. And what would you bargain for in exchange of your pound of flesh? Do you know a woman named Laura? I asked, adding the family's last name. I do. And she is your grandniece? The crone frowned. She is. I offer my pound of flesh in exchange for your promise to attend her upcoming wedding. She was quiet for what seemed like a very long time. She finally said, Very well. So you accept fair terms and a villain's mind. Come then. We'll draw up the bargain. In either blood, ink, or both. Laura's wedding was a spectacular success. The crone attended, as she was contractually obligated to attend. It gave Laura great cash, and it made my reputation. Business poured in. I wasn't just planning weddings. I was bargaining for the impossible on behalf of wealthy clients. And I was paid very, very well due to it. And anyway, by the time Laura was married, the stump where my hand used to be had healed. Mostly. I was hired as a boom operator on a low-budget drama shooting in rural Pennsylvania. 4-person crew, 6 actors, 1 week of filming. The director, Ben, was one of those serious indie guys who spoke softly and used the word cinema without irony. We shot at a small farmhouse that belonged to one of Ben's relatives. Isolated, quiet, barely any signal. It still had power and running water, though, so it worked. The film was a character drama about 2 brothers arguing over what to do with their late father's home. It was simple and intimate. No horror, nothing supernatural. The first strange thing happened on day 2. I was reviewing audio that night alone in the kitchen. Most of it sounded normal, but in take 3 of scene 14, I heard something odd. After one of the actors finishes his line, there's a pause. Then I heard a voice I didn't recognize say, "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't one of the actors. I rewatched the footage. Both of them were in the shot, and neither one spoke. The voice was low, muttered, like it was meant to be heard only by someone listening closely. I asked Ben about it the next morning. He brushed it off and said it was probably me breathing too close to the boom mic. That wasn't it. I know what my breathing sounds like. I let it go. Then the script changed. Not officially. There were no new drafts or revisions emailed to us. But that night, one of the actresses, Mallory, asked me if she had been supposed to say something about the basement. I didn't remember any line about a basement. She showed me her printed copy, page 23. There was a handwritten line in the margins that said, "He's still down there. I heard him moving again." It didn't match her handwriting or pen. I checked my own script. That line wasn't there. We weren't even filming near the basement. Nothing in the story involved anyone being down there. I showed it to Ben. He laughed and said Mallory was probably just playing a prank. The next night, we lost power during a thunderstorm. Everything shut off. No lights, no cameras. But the old cassette deck in the living room clicked on. It played static for a few seconds, then a voice. That same low voice from before said, "We're not done filming." We had never used that cassette deck. Nobody knew it even worked. Nobody had touched it. Mallory left the next morning. She didn't say goodbye. She just got in her car and drove off. Ben insisted we finish. He said the weirdness was feeding the atmosphere of the shoot. At that point, I was too tired to argue. We only had a couple of days left. On the 5th day, we filmed a quiet scene with the lead sitting in a bedroom. It was just one shot, pushing slowly toward the door from the hallway. No dialogue, natural light. When we reviewed the footage, we saw something we hadn't seen in the room. There was already someone sitting in the chair when the shot started. Just a silhouette, faint and blurry. But there. The actor walks into the room near the end of the shot, and by the time he gets there, the chair is empty. No cuts, no tricks. Just gone. Ben said we should keep it. Said it adds mystery. That was when I decided to leave. I packed my gear and walked off set that night. Didn't get paid. Didn't care. A few days ago, a link showed up in my inbox from one of the PAs. She found a rough cut of the movie uploaded to Vimeo. It was under a different title. He's Still Down There. That was never the name of the project. I didn't watch it, but the thumbnail is just a black frame, maybe from a night scene. In the corner, barely visible, there's a shape. Someone sitting, just watching. Not one of the actors. Not anyone I recognize. I closed the tab. I haven't opened it again, but sometimes when I'm alone and things are quiet, I think I can still hear that voice. We're not done filming. This morning, I pulled a tiny monitoring pin from my tooth. Now my wife is gone and so is every trace of our life together. I have to provide a tiny bit of context before I dive in. Stick with me. I'd lost both of my parents by high school graduation, so when I was offered an out-of-state scholarship, I took it. Moved from Tennessee to Oklahoma and made real fast friends with the guy they roomed me with. A week or two in, my friend let me know that he was about to earn $800 and get a free letter of recommendation for this clinical trial that he was gonna do. Well, I was broke, and he also promised that this girl I had my eye on was taking part too. I was obviously on board. It really wasn't even that memorable. The highlight was meeting her. Lara was taking part in the trial too, and we spent hours and hours in the waiting room sharing stories and getting close. The only other memory I have of the trial was sitting for 2 to 3 hours once a week in a very gray room, where I had to talk to a therapist type dude who asked a million questions covering every topic you can think of. If memory serves, I'm pretty sure that it had something to do with studying the process that go into a person's moral choices. It was purely therapist sessions too. No needles or pins. It was easy. It was over after 6 weeks, and my only symptoms at the end were a little extra pocket money, and I'd grown completely attached to Lara. Other than using my small fortune to buy Lara a ring and a pretty white dress, nothing worth noting happened between finishing the trial and now. So the real story starts about 3 weeks ago. On the second to last Friday in May, I got into an accident on my way home from work. Standard stuff. I got T-boned at an intersection. My car needed a new door and some internal stuff that insurance took care of, but I was fine. Whiplash, but that comes with any accident. Poor guy in the car that hit me hadn't been wearing his seatbelt though. Broke the windscreen with his own face. I saw the ambulance take him in a body bag. This is where I'm gonna lose you now and you're going to resign me to the cuckoo's nest, but please stick with me. I'm not crazy. 3 weeks later, we're on the second Friday in June now. I'm on my way home from work in the crappy sedan my insurance sent me up with. Well, my car's in the shop. Well, I'm honestly still a little on edge on this journey given the recent accident. I'm keeping an extra eye on the road, and I get to the intersection where the poor dude T-boned me, and I can see from my lane that he is fast approaching in the same car he died in 3 weeks ago. Hallucination? Maybe, but it felt just as real as anything else. Just like last time, other drivers were honking and interacting with this dude because he was moving way too fast for the speed limit. And next thing I hear my radio tune out and then a voice. I know how this sounds. The radio said, "You don't have to make the same choice." I don't know if I was subconsciously obeying the radio or if this would have been my course of action either way, but I braked. Hard. He kept going and sped right past me this time, but he made sure his eyes met mine for just a second. It was him. It was his car. I don't know. As soon as he was out of sight, the radio started up again like normal and I had to just make my way home. It shook me, but what can I do? How can I explain this to Lara? I didn't. I wouldn't be posting if it was just that, though. We'll skip all of the boring crap in between and I'll cut to this morning. I've been having some trouble with one of my teeth for a few weeks. The pain was sorta just my whole jaw for the first 2 weeks, so I put it down to the accident at first. I did get whiplash and Google told me that could cause jaw pain, so that was that for a while until the pain got more localized and it was clear that the issue was a specific tooth. I've been taking OTCs and warming up Lara's microwave heating pad and holding it to my jaw, but this morning I'd had enough. I know you're not meant to touch your teeth with your grubby digits, especially when you think that there is a problem, so I hadn't. Makes me feel kinda dumb now, really. I took myself to the bathroom mirror about 8:30 in the morning, washed my hands and got to work. It felt as if something foreign, like a toothpick or a floss remnant, had wedged itself somehow inside my tooth, and after 4 to 5 minutes of yanking and scraping, I felt something cold hit my tongue. I spat it into my hand to see what had been bugging me, and I was immediately confused. I've had 34 years on this planet. It's not too often that I come across something new. It looked like a pin, but it wasn't a pin. I knew that I needed to find a way to inspect this tiny tooth inhabitant, so I took a few photos with my phone to try and pick up the details that my eyes couldn't. What I was holding did resemble a pin. The part that was directly inside my tooth was no thicker than a staple and no longer than an eyelash, and it had a tiny round base that I assume was to keep it in place. There was enamel residue on the base part, so I think that there was some kind of veneer adhesive or something ensuring it stayed stuck. On the inside of the base was the only tangible clue. The letters NOS had been engraved in tiny letters. So I took to Google. I tried a few searches like NOS toothpin, NOS device, but nothing yielded anything useful until I tried NOS dental implant. The AI overview at the top of the page said, in some instances, the phrase NOS tooth implant can be used to refer to the minuscule pin-like devices used by psychologists to carry out neural observation studies. My eyes were pulled from the words I was trying to understand down to a search link result. It was purple, not blue though. That usually means that my browser has accessed this page in the past, but I certainly had never seen it before. The search result was titled, "Controversial clinic trial shut down in 2009 may have continued without consent." And when I tell you that I've never clicked a link so fast in my life, I mean it. As the page loaded, I was already hovering my fingers over Command and P on the keyboard so that I'd have a hard copy of whatever this was to look at. You've got to understand how quickly my paranoia was escalating in those moments. I'm not sure why. It just felt important. When it finally loaded, my eyes bounced from one disturbing keyword to another before settling on a line that read, "And even though the study was shut down due to the concerns surrounding ethical standards, evidence has come to light that suggests that a good number of the participants from the 2009 study are completely unaware that the clinical trial never came to a close." My brain rattled as it tried to process the words. Nothing made sense. I have never pressed print so fast. I don't know. I thought it might feel a little more real if I could hold it in my hands, you know? I made way to my printer to find that it had only printed the header of the newspaper it had been clipped from. That's it. None of the article content had printed, so I switched back around to send it to print again. But the article was gone. Properly gone. I refreshed the page and got 404'd. I pressed back and got a different error, so I retyped the Google search to get it back that way, and this time, Google had no results. The AI overview was gone. My search history? Completely intact, other than the searches that pertained to what I'd found in my tooth. I was about to go and find Lara. I'd been spiraling for nearly an hour, but as I looked up from my computer, there she was, stood, watching me from the doorway. "Ethan?" The homely warmth in her eyes, the singy-songy bounce in her voice that only comes out when she's talking to me, her signature hyper-energized sway while she stands. It was all gone. She looked like Lara, but she felt different. This thought seemingly fell straight out of my head. "Hey babe, you seem off this morning. Everything all right?" What followed really did sound like her. The intonation in her voice was off, but she sounded otherwise just like my Lara. "Ethan, you look aghast. Can I get you anything?" Her voice was so flat. She sounded like a subpar actor who hadn't memorized her lines. I couldn't concentrate on her words. "Lara, I'm not sure what's going on. My tooth, She cut me off. "Oh, Ethan, you've done it, haven't you?" A fleeting sigh being the only display of emotion from Lara so far, but even that felt inauthentic and weird. It felt like a movie. I couldn't understand what was unfolding in front of me. I still don't understand. That's why I'm here. I need someone to help me make sense of this. The world seemed to seize for a brief moment, and all I could hear was the subtle click that I knew to be my front door, and I felt my morning coffee curdle in my gut. I tried to stand at my desk, but my leg muscles turned to spaghetti and I didn't have the strength. Lara didn't move a muscle. She didn't even flinch. The Lara I knew was apprehensive and jumpy at an unexpected knock at the door. Her resolute stance in the doorway at this moment was more frightening to me than whatever I could hear now progressing up my staircase. Now that I have a little bit of hindsight, I think I understand why the threat levels seem so mismatched. Think of someone who you know really well, someone you're close to, your best friend, your brother, maybe your wife. You know their routines, what they do and don't like, and you've seen them in enough situations to have a general idea of how they'll react in most circumstances. Do you think you'd find it frightening if at a time when you were at your most vulnerable, they suddenly became cold, altered, and unpredictable? As I opened my mouth to speak, two large men emerged from behind Lara, with her still unaffected. My tongue dried up in an instant. I had no words. She moved now, just slightly forward to allow the two men into my office. Her movement after so much standstill rekindled my adrenaline and mended the frayed wiring that connects my mouth to my brain. I managed 2 words. "Done what?" The men were now on either side of me, neither one of them speaking a word. I already knew I couldn't fight them. For starters, there were two of them, but even if it were a fairer fight, my nervous system had already chosen freeze rather than either of the more useful fight or flight. Lara? I sounded desperate, like a fearful child seeking comfort from a parent. My growing panic and state of desperation made no impact on Lara. This wasn't the Lara who was so overran with sympathy and compassion after my accident not long ago, and she took 2 weeks off work and refused to leave my side for a moment because she was so concerned that I'd need her help, and she wouldn't be there. This Lara was not that Lara. Not my Lara. My arms were restrained behind my back by one man as the other one retrieved something from an internal pocket in his jacket. This was all happening in my peripheral vision as I kept my gaze locked on Lara. I've done what? My attention was pulled toward an intense piercing in my upper thigh that was imminently followed by a strange sort of disconnected warmth radiating through my body, my spaghetti muscles now a toxic blended sludge. My vision was trying to betray me, but I put every ounce of my energy into focusing on Lara's face. Oh, Ethan. Lara echoed the same performative sigh. You've pulled the pin, haven't you? That's the last thing I remember. I woke up in my bed around 10:30 p.m. No Lara, no men, no pin, all gone. I've spent the last 3 hours tearing my house apart to find any scraps of Lara, but there's nothing. We've lived here 9 years. There's nothing. My phone is wrong. It is my phone, but there's no trace of Lara, no texts between us, no photos, no Lara. Not only that, no anyone. My contacts now consist of my barber, a couple restaurants, and some old work contacts. No people, no friends, no Lara. My memory feels like one of those jigsaws that you might pick up secondhand at a charity shop, the kind that came to you without all of the pieces, the kind that you never had a chance to make whole. I don't know what to do. I'm just so stuck on one thought. If I could redo one thing in my life, I would never have pulled the pin. I don't know who I am without her. I need answers. If anyone has any information about NOS, about the trial or similar trials, please reach out. I need to remember. At dinner, my sister Lindsay excitedly told us about the angel in the attic. We grew up in a religious family, so it wasn't too weird that her imaginary friend would be of the biblical variety. She was 8 at the time, making me 15. 5 years ago, we were at my mom's sister's, Aunt Margaret, visiting for the summer. Aunt Margaret's house might be considered a mansion by some. Rooms upon rooms, 3 stories tall. Entering through the main door, you're greeted with a wide, curving staircase that leads to the second floor, which holds 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a sunroom. Behind the staircase, the main floor, a kitchen, 2 sitting rooms, a game room, dining room, and yet another sunroom. The third floor, accessed by a tight, almost vertical staircase, was basically just the attic. One expansive open room above the rest of the house. Lindsay had been spending her days exploring the house, her favorite room being the attic. At dinner, though, I remember her saying, "I thought angels were supposed to be pretty," and Mom replied, "Do you remember Zechariah? He was terrified when he saw an angel." My sister nodded knowingly at that. "It was very scary at first, but only for a little bit." Mom and Aunt Margaret smiled at her, but I thought it was so odd. Why would a kid purposely make up scary things? The next day she disappeared again to explore. We didn't think much of it until it was dinner, and she still hadn't turned up. We began looking through the rooms, calling out for her. Eventually we ended up at the attic stairs, and there she was, curled up at the bottom, silently crying. Mom swept her up and brought her downstairs, where we tried everything we could to console her. She calmed down, but still wouldn't tell us what happened. She wouldn't tell us anything. She couldn't, I guess. For the past 5 years, she hasn't spoken a word. There have been so many doctors and therapists, appointment after appointment, never leading to any answers. No one could give us an actual reason for this, and Lindsay wouldn't explain either, not in writing anyways. I'm not sure she even knew why she couldn't talk. The three of us made an unspoken agreement to never return to Aunt Margaret's, though. Until Aunt Margaret died last week, and Mom somehow ended up being the one in charge of her estate. So back we went. Just Mom and I. Lindsay refused to go, and who could blame her? The house felt so heavy when we arrived. My aunt had started staying on the main floor, so only a few rooms had seen any life. Everywhere else covered in dust, all the curtains tightly closed. We thought it'd be easier to share a room, so we found the cleanest one and got it ready. Fresh sheets and an open window instantly improved the conditions, so you almost forgot about the musty and oppressive state of the rest of the house. Exhausted from traveling, we both slept hard that night. In the light of a new day, we found ourselves emboldened and ended up at the attic steps. We stood there for a few minutes, Mom looking up the staircase, me watching her. We could be here all day, so I went around her and began going up. She followed closely behind me. The stairs creaked with each footfall, moaning under our weight, warning us. As we crested the top, we could see there was nothing except boxes and old furniture covered in more dust than the downstairs. A few boarded up windows provided enough light to see and walked through. Not really sure what we were looking for. A box of old books, my grandmother's dresser, someone's coin collection, a mix of feeling at ease and disappointed. We still couldn't find an explanation for my sister's condition. There was nothing worthwhile. We decided to go back down and start on the main floor, sorting Aunt Margaret's belongings into keep or donate boxes. I was distracted. There was something about the attic, something up there that had answers, and I needed to find out. I waited until Mom fell asleep that night before trying to go back. I slipped out of bed and made my way through the winding halls. I had my phone's light, but it only uncovered a few steps ahead of me. At the staircase, I paused, looking up the narrow corridor. There was some other light on up there, illuminating the top of the stairs and the landing. With each step I took, I felt calmer, more sure of myself. And as I stepped into the glow, a warm feeling washed over me. It was so comforting. I saw a figure in front of one of the windows halfway across the room. The light seemed to be emanating out from them. I was alarmed. Someone had broken in, but that feeling quickly subsided and gave way to peace. No, they were supposed to be here, and it was okay. My body began moving on its own toward the figure. I wasn't in control, but I didn't care. Its back was to me, and as I drew closer, I could see through the glow. A gray robe draped over it, the sleeves as long as the bottom brushing against the floor. They turned to me then, the hood cascading around their face like hair, the robe swishing fluidly like it was more than clothes, like it was part of them. The face, oh, the face, like a blank canvas, the same pale gray stretched thin over a long and narrow frame. The piece of me still conscious wanted to scream, but my legs kept moving forward, my arms reaching out. The figure opened its arms, embracing me, holding me into the fabric of itself, swallowing me. I welcomed it. A warmth spread throughout my body, and I let myself sink in. I'd never felt so safe, so happy, so loved. But as my limbs grew lighter, like I was floating, the warmth turned to burning. I couldn't feel anything except heat and my lungs constricting, and somehow I pushed myself back into my body, back in control. I tore myself free from its grasp and stumbled backwards. I was previously floating, and now it was like I had been slammed into the ground. I was clumsy and struggling to make myself move how I wanted. Every step, every breath hurt, and my vision was blacking out. I thought I was at the stairs, and I reached out to grab the wall, but there was nothing except air. I lost my balance and began falling for real, crashing down the stairs and landing hard on my back. Then darkness, and floating again. When I woke back up, Mom was standing over me, stroking my hair. I realized we were in the hospital. When she saw my eyes open, she cried out, and tears began falling down her face, landing on my own. I tried saying something. I wanted to ask what was happening, but my throat tightened. Nothing came out. I couldn't speak.